I recently had lunch with someone I've known for almost 5 decades. As I sat there, he shuffled down the kitchen, complaining of this and that, bemoaning how things just aren't done correctly, pulling distractedly on his white hair. Suddenly a chord of memory was played, and I remembered this very scene playing out 20 years earlier. The same person enacting the scene of the despised and rejected foreigner. An almost light-bulb moment. This person has become indistinguishable from those he feared, rejected, and mocked. How had this happened over the years? It was G.K. Chesterton who once noted, "It's not that we can't see the solution, we actually can't see the problem." As Bono gives us another way of looking at this, we thought that we had all the answers. It was the questions we had wrong. It was Einstein who used this very fact when he remarked that we cannot answer the question. No, we cannot solve the problem with the same mindset that created the problem. To ask the right question, even when sometimes we don't know what we are looking for, this is the secret and the intuition of coming to wisdom and finding the way to peace and goodness. But for this to take place, we do need to change our minds. We do need to repent. In today's Gospel, Jesus asks Philip a question. Where can we buy some bread for these people to eat? We are told that it is a test. Jesus asks the question because he has something to teach Philip. He already knows that he will do a miracle and multiply the small amount of food supplied by the boy. This gospel message can be seen almost as a counterpoint to Jesus not working any miracles in his hometown because of their fear, because of their rejection. Jesus' own question is aimed as much at us, his disciples, as it is at Philip. The question of where do we buy? This evokes a sense of seeking, a journey to discover something. The question is put in the communal sense of togetherness, of relation, of we, that involves the disciples of Jesus with Jesus himself, the Son of God in cooperation with his creation, Jesus with us, his disciples. Then we have the question of buying. In the Aramaic world of Jesus, this is a matter of exchange taking place. Something is bought and exchanged for something else, normally of the same value. But Philip responds too quickly, just as we so often do ourselves, without fully hearing, jumping to conclusions. Instead, Philip complains to Jesus about how much it would cost to buy bread for such a large crowd. How can we buy bread for so many? There's perhaps a little of Philip in most of us, mistrusting under the guise of prudence. Times are bad, it won't work, and so on and so on. We've heard them all. Andrew, however, responds in a different way. He brings the little that is available among them to Jesus. There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many? Why bring this little to Jesus? What is on Andrew's mind? We must assume that he did expect Jesus to do something with the little that was brought to him. Here we have some faith, some trust in the person of Jesus. Now we see that this is all that Jesus needs. Jesus does not work without us, but instead takes our little in exchange for an abundance, the fruit of the earth and the work of human hands, in exchange for a share in God's very divinity itself. Jesus tells us in this question that the search is for bread, for food, for nourishment for the people who have come to hear Jesus speak. There is indeed a need here, a hunger. What is this hunger? Is it only physical, or is there something deeper here? What is the greatest hunger in our world today? Loneliness, being unwanted, unloved, uncared for, forgotten by everybody, rejected. I think that is a much greater hunger, a much greater poverty than the person who has nothing to eat. The words of Mother Teresa of Calcutta. You see, we are made to be in relationship. It is said that we are who we are because of whom we love, and whom we are loved by. In this observation, however, we see how we become the very thing that we reject and despise. When we bring this evil into constant vision, we give that evil power in our lives. The power of Jesus in our lives is replaced by lack of love, by rejection, and by indifference. And so we hear in the Gospel that Jesus took, gave thanks, gave out. The miracle simply happens because Jesus is present, because Jesus is God. And John makes it clear that this miracle is a sign that points beyond itself to a higher reality. The people, of course, do not understand this yet. They are still at the level of having had their hunger satisfied in a way that cost them nothing. So that when they crossed over in their boats to look for Jesus, he told them plainly, I tell you most solemnly, you are not looking for me because you have seen the signs, but because you have bread you wanted to eat. It is Jesus' great desire to lead them to understand this hunger as the hunger for the only one true God, which only God can satisfy. He wants to bring them to understand that their hunger is more for Him, Jesus, the Christ, than for bread. There is an impulsive readiness of the people to make Jesus their king. They sensed this man was worth claiming for themselves, and they want him to be their king. However, Jesus is not about to let them settle for such limited and one-sided relationship. He is much more than a provider of earthly food. Man does not live on bread alone. John takes care to tell us that it was shortly before the Jewish feast of Passover, and this is very important. The multiplication of the loaves and fishes takes place in the shadow of the great Jewish feast, which released them from slavery and brought them into freedom. The miracle of the feeding of the multitude is a sign whose meaning is realized at the Last Supper, which will be fully realized in the heavenly banquet in which Jesus will feed us with the food of angels, his own self, the very intimate, the most intimate of all relationships. The feeding of the 5,000 shows the remarkably generosity of God and the great burning love towards us. When God gives abundantly. God gives more than we need for ourselves, so that we may have something to share with others, especially those who lack the very needs of life. God takes the little we have and multiplies it for the good of others. Do we trust in God's provision for us, and do we share freely with others, especially those who are in need? Lord Jesus, you satisfy the deepest longing of our heart, and you feed us with the finest wheat. Fill us with gratitude, and give us a generous heart, that we may freely share with others what you have given to us. It is with Jesus that the impossible becomes possible. It is that God's will supply what is needed. It is that no situation is hopeless when you have Jesus. It is that Jesus is the bread of life. Yes, Jesus always had a purpose in asking questions. It looks like this question for Philip was both a test of his faith and a learning opportunity for him. Just think about it. Philip would never forget the question, he would never forget his own answer, and he would never forget what Jesus did afterwards. Do I find myself pointing towards the darkness, the lack, the limitations, and the absence of good? Jesus invites us all to come with him on a journey towards the multiplying of light and goodness in our world. If we together place our vision and our hope into the hands of Jesus, the kingdom will indeed shine as brightly as the sun. May the Lord grant you peace.